Hi everyone, my name is Radi Falhamidi. I am a junior at Stanford studying product design. My Browzwear X FashionX design consists of a modular three-piece puffer coat which can be split into a skirt, a vest, or a long sleeve puffer coat, and under all of that is a collared vest that can peek through when you're wearing just your puffer vest and your skirt. The theme Back to the Future made me reminisce about the quirkiness of zipped up cargos I saw in elementary school worn by all the kids, and I thought, what would be an interesting way to combine this outdated aspect of modularity, which consists of zips and cheap attachments, to also the idea of sustainability. How can I make something that is not just a recyclable material, which what seems to be the trend right now, but also reusable in different ways, and thus came about this design. I also wanted the general look of my design to step into the abstract a little. I loved how boisterous it was with the color blocking and just overall big and grandeur silhouette of what I made. And initially I wanted it to have a Saudi traditional print because I thought it would be such an ironic dichotomy to have such a traditional Saudi pattern onto something that is very much a Western silhouette worn in cold winters.
Hello, my name is Asad Lure, and as a designer, visual artist, and overall creative director, looking at the socio-historical and cultural context to pop culture, such as music, entertainment, fashion, art, is especially important to me as I engage in media analysis and looking at ways in which we take trends within fashion and repackage them, and repackage nostalgia for a new generation. And with my designs, I pose the question of how the fashion industry, how do we draw from past pop cultural periods and shape clothing expressions and experiences, and consider the complex and nuances within those periods, especially, and those socio-cultural issues within that time. And using fashion and aesthetic as a way of expressing that and expression change and progress through time. I want to make sure that I challenge the extraction and commodification of Black influences and Black culture and Black cultural clothing expressions in fashion, and use my ever-growing knowledge of media, Black popular culture, and ways that fashion has been expressed throughout history to inform my designs. So looking at the early 2000s in a different way and highlighting the Black influences within those spaces that are generally minimized. Looking at sagging as a way of expressing Blackness and looking at it outside of the realms of traditional criminality and homophobia that is usually associated with it, and emphasizing that through different silhouettes, and looking at silhouettes in a way that is not just meant to emphasize the waist in a traditional way that is meant for skinny people. So these designs were a way for me to play with gender expression, with layering skirts, and playing with layering of different materials such as leather, denim, cotton, in a way that accentuates different parts of the body, and using different netting, different materials, exposing and revealing, and different types of ways of covering up in a way that is more accessible. And with that, I wanted to make sure that the designs reflect those aspects of experimenting and going outside of the norm, what is considered masculine, what is considered feminine, and layering in a way that is what is considered a traditional silhouette, something that I really find valuable. And taking traditional garments and pieces and styling them in different ways is something that is a way of expressing self, expressing identities, and expressing the intersection of those identities. And that is the way that I wanted to reconstruct how we look through time and how we look through periods in the past as a way of expressing our hopes, dreams, and aspirations for now and the future.
Hi, my name is Allison Cabinday and I'm currently undeclared on my major. I'm thinking either economics or product design, but I'm really not sure. For my design, I was really spoken to by the idea of creating clothing without season, because there's just such vast overconsumption in the industry right now, and I'm really interested in sustainability, and wanted to try and, my design at least to try and find one way to solve that. So through that, I tried to use a relatively timeless silhouette based on the mod look, which it still remains, a lot of the silhouettes are still popular now. And I also wanted to make my piece modular so that it could change with time and changing tastes. And so in my design I have alternating collars which can change with whatever the wearer wants, and the sleeves can come off. And this didn't end up getting executed, but I also wanted to make it so that the pocket shapes could change.
Hi there, my name is Neil Cordingley and I am participating in the Browzwear and Stanford FashionX collaboration. And personally, with the garments that I designed, I began my design process with a look at genderless and gender alternative fashion. For example, I really admired the design values of Palomo and Ludovic de Saint-Sernin. These designs are inspired by queer fashion and by bringing together elements of the masculine and feminine. And my design sketch started with an outline of a male body, and I felt drawn to the idea of an armor look that reflected the values that I spoke about before. And what resulted was an armor top that feels elegant, ethereal, queer, and androgynous.
The two looks I designed for this collection were predominantly inspired by Dior and Balenciaga couture, where there's a very strong emphasis on exaggerated silhouettes that depart from the shape of the human body, which I find very playful. At the same time, in constructing these silhouettes, I indexed a lot more on flowier fabrics, such as chiffon and silk, which smoothes out the silhouette to bring kind of naturalistic elements to it and blurs the boundary between gender and season.
For my collection, all of my pieces were very heavily inspired by 1960s kind of twiggy fashion and a lot of the geometry kind of shapeism that's very true of that era, more particularly in the patterns and the silhouettes of also the 1940s. And then I was also playing with a lot of concept of body dysmorphia and how that can imagine itself into fashion, in the sense that to what extent are we in control of the silhouettes that we wear, and to what extent should this clothing accentuate, diminish, or just completely hide what we look like. So those are some of the elements that I was playing with my designs that I inspired in the collection.
Hi, my name is Sarca and I'm a current sophomore at Stanford, and I'm pursuing a major in product design as well as minors in art history and theater and performance studies. So the theme for this year's collection was Back to the Future and kind of our take on fashion in the future and kind of the imagination of that. And so for my design, I really wanted to focus on the layering of different patterns and different textures, and kind of just this meshing of all the different aspects of design. And that was kind of my take of sort of a fashion reimagined in the future. And I also really focus on a specific color, and I chose the color green because at the moment that I was sketching my design, green was very like having a moment, very much having a moment, and I just kept seeing like all these new designs, and like all these people were wearing like head to toe in green, and so I thought if green was having a moment now, it also could be having a moment in the future again, and kind of the recycling of colors, and you know, how every trend sort of comes back, you know, every couple of years. And so that was kind of my take on that in terms of my design, and I focused really on on kind of the fur trims. I kind of added that, and I also added patterns kind of that alluded to the shape of her eyes, and I kind of just like that kind of the almond shape, and that kind of was sort of a reference to kind of seeing the future and looking towards the future. And I don't know, I kind of wanted to really add that aspect to my design. And of course I had to change a bit, modify some things in order to make the collection more cohesive and kind of adhere to the color palette that we had chosen. So it was a different shade of green than I had originally intended, but I still think it works great, and it definitely makes the collection a lot more cohesive, and you know, shows a collaboration between amongst all 10 designers and all that. But yeah.
Hey yo, my name is Michael Cordingley. I'm a self-design engineering major at Stanford University. My fashion designs were inspired by nature, specifically mushrooms. I think they're a very amazing and beautiful plant with a lot of inspiration, from form and colors to function. I think drawing inspiration from these plants and like the natural world is something that has been missing, and something that brings me great comfort in a time where we are kind of being forced into a digital world through COVID and isolation, and most of the way we interact with the elements around us are through a screen or some sort of digital element. So, you know, reconnecting with nature through clothing is something that I would like to explore, and I try to make that known through my designs. The bottoms for both of my looks were inspired by mushrooms. The shorts were inspired by the lion's mane mushroom, which has a fuzzy, soft-looking texture that I thought would be good for a pair of pants. And the skirt was inspired by a mushroom that actually wears a skirt. It's very interesting. And the second I saw it, I was reminded of something that would look good on a runway or out in the street. And my puffer jacket, I really wanted to find a way to repurpose scrap fabrics. So my idea was to stuff the puffer with scrap fabrics that have been shredded and given a new life in another garment.
Hi guys, my name is Olivia Wang, and I'm currently a sophomore at Stanford studying symbolic systems and concentrating in product design. For our cohort, Back to the Future as a theme has meant reconstructing a look without size, without season, without gender, and this was a really awesome concept to work with, and it was also a really fun mood board to work with. I remember back in the fall, we were trying to brainstorm a theme for this project. We were thinking about slow fashion, of course, but we were also thinking about something bigger and something entirely futuristic. When I was creating my own mood board, I wanted to take inspiration from objects and animals and patterns and designs that really spoke to me. And this ended up being a crazy Figma file of salmon, bananas, plastic bags, mesh, bubble wrap, puffer bags, and grapefruits, to name a few. And when the sketching part came, it was a matter of iterating and seeing which textures and colors worked together and which didn't. I wanted to create pieces that could be worn in various seasons, on various people, and this slowly grew into a look consisting of a banana textured corset with a grapefruit beaded puffer underneath. a salmon textured belt, and flare brown pants, because you can never go wrong with that. And mesh gloves, which is kind of incorporating the mesh aspect. And to my great surprise, it worked, or at least I think it worked. The colors came together in a way that perfectly depicted my interests in slow fashion, in a circular ecosystem, in food and food waste, and in plastic waste.
My conceptual approach to the prompt Back to the Future considered the future florality as technology and artifice replace natural spaces. I imagined a robotic model dressed in floral tops that evokes a sort of nostalgic vision of the past, with each look reflecting a flower that has since disappeared. The robotic models pose for customers who can now only experience a faux rendition of nature's elegance on the runway. For everything society has gained through development, there is more that it has lost.
One of my top learnings from this project was how to communicate effectively my ideas to the designer. It was such a pleasure to work with Yagdish, and I think he did a phenomenal job in making my ideas come to life. And I think it's because I tried to make an honest attempt at being very specific in what I wanted, bringing in references, highlighting certain images, and I think that skill of communication has been super useful.
And through this process, I learned a lot, namely collaborating with Browzwear, my fellow designers, and the indies really gave me an understanding of the digital fashion design process and also an appreciation for each actor's role in the final product.
What I learned from my general Browzwear experience, firstly, I think it's definitely being open-minded in the design process. Looking back at my initial sketches and how they evolved into the final designs that are on showcase today, I've realized how much of the changes are internal as well as external. Internal in the sense of just realizing when you put sketches on 2D paper, how some of the actual construction and the draping of the material would look in 3D is very different, and seeing how that kind of the physical properties of the materials come to life through this rendering software has been really eye-opening. On the other hand, there's the external part of being an individual and a collection of designers to design one cohesive collection under one theme, and that involves a lot of coordination. On our front, we did a unified color palette, which I had to develop my own or adapt my own designs to, which was another process that I learned a lot about. From this experience, I definitely also learned about the challenges of traditional product development versus the 3D product lifecycle. Just from using the software, it seems that the iteration speed that we can do on software is very fast, where in all of these back and forth critiques and collaborations with the indies, we can see, oh, I want this part fixed, I want this part to be brought in or let out. And all of that can be done rather seamlessly on the software without having to produce a single piece of clothing in the real life. Whereas just to think of the traditional process of actually manufacturing prototypes, sending that physically to partners, to clients, to get their critique, I can see how the delay can happen a lot more. And in this kind of more collaborative environment on Browzwear, I think there's also more opportunities for you to pull inspiration from all kinds of sources, to collaborate with a lot more sources, either indies, designers, industry clients, and just to kind of see how all of this process comes together.
In terms of the challenges with using the software, designing on 3D modeling software as opposed to like physical garment design, were that while it was like not as much trial and error with physical material, there was a lot of like learning curve when it came to actually learning about the software, like actually learning 3D modeling, but that got more efficient as I obviously like went through that learning curve, and overall would be much more product and like time efficient the more that you know about the program. And those are kind of like the main challenges, but overall it was a really amazing learning opportunity and a really amazing way to actually go through the iteration process of making a garment and have it be very sustainable with no actual physical garment necessary at all for this at all.
From this experience, I definitely learned more about myself as a designer and kind of the editing process in using V-Stitcher, and also just using V-Stitcher in general. I think that was such a really cool software and tool that I now have and that I know more about, and is definitely going to help me in the future as I'm creating new designs and want to see them in real time, and not have to like wait to for the design to come in if you're actually making it by hand and all that. But I definitely learned more about myself as a designer and how my design process is, and also learning how to work with others, and learning sort of the collaborative side of fashion, and trying to help create and bring this collection to life. I think the biggest challenge with the traditional versus the 3D product lifestyle is the adjustments that you want to make. Like I said, in the traditional and sort of like actually hand making the design and stuff, it takes time, right, to actually first create the prototype, and then if the designer wants to make changes, it's kind of like you either have to reconstruct the whole garment again and start from scratch, and of course not only that does that take time, but it's also usually a waste of resources, and especially since fashion has such a big impact on the environment, it's very costly, and just a waste of fabric and sources and stuff that is very damaging to the environment, especially at the level that some companies produce designs. It can be very harmful. And so whereas with the 3D product lifestyle and learning and making the designs come to life on like softwares like a V-Stitcher, it's really easy to make these edits in real time and just not have there be such a waste of resources, and just easily be able to make those modifications on the avatar.
From this experience, I learned that there is a way to make clothes that is not horrible for the environment, and is actually very versatile and adjustable. It was very interesting to see this melding of STEM and art in the Browzwear platform. I also learned that working as a group, challenges will arise, but from those challenges, a lot of inspiration also arises. So it's kind of a give and take, which I found really important to my creative process and learning how this fashion world works. Some advice for industry professionals, I would say remember the people. I think a lot of the times I see in the fashion world, people are forgetting the people that are actually purchasing and wearing and finding use from these garments and materials. So I would just say keep the people in mind, keep the planet in mind. You are ultimately doing this for people, hopefully. So maintain accessibility, in every way, environmental, economical, and size-wise, race-wise, remember the people. There's basic humanity,
I learned a whole lot from this experience. Most importantly, I would say being able to communicate my vision to the amazing Indy, who was in charge of creating my look on V-Stitcher, the platform. Especially because time was limited, it was critical that the feedback I gave was clear and accurate. Overall, I really enjoyed the virtual creation of this look. I've never designed a look before, but I appreciated how flexible the platform was. There was no need to source textures or fabrics. V-Stitcher seemed to be able to do it all. And of course, it would be nice to iterate with the physical look in front of me, feeling it, feeling how it feels. But because of how much waste the fashion industry produces in their iteration process normally, I'm so glad that something like Browzwear and V-Stitcher exists.
This program was a wonderful introduction for a futuristic design software that helped me simplify the pattern making and draping process. Browzwear's flexibility as a design program was unexpected, and working with avatar, material, drape, and color forced me to really consciously consider what I wanted in each step of the design process to create a sort of cohesive, meaningful look. I really gained a fuller understanding of designing in an industry context and how this tool could be used for real companies to cut wastes and costs. The waste, overconsumption, and Eurocentrism of the traditional fashion system still remains ingrained in the system with marginal changes over the last 30 years. I think that 3D design software has not made a large enough footprint to really overthrow this system, and even the 3D design process does not factor in circularity and inclusivity as much as it should. If the fashion industry remains a system based on mass manufacturing and high quantity generic good production, then the marginal gains created by the implementation of 3D design will really be irrelevant. The challenge here is to destroy the negative habits of the traditional system in the embrace of new design forms, which I think is very possible with the right attention devoted to implementing 3D in the right way.